Hello. Hope everyone's having a good week. We're chugging right along here in grad school. Getting almost done with this little class. It's crazy. It's flown by. Today I'm going to talk about how Thomas Jefferson was really one of the more influential people of the Revolutionary era. He's not only one of the main writers of the Declaration of Independence, but he also did so much important work with religious freedom in Virginia. Like, while there's several different areas of his life that we could really thoroughly study and discuss, today I'm going to talk about Jefferson's complicated relationship with slavery and also slaves. So, according to expectations, historians must be dedicated to a reasoned and investigated reconstruction of primary sources. That being said, the sources about Jefferson are really torn. The historiography on Jefferson and slavery has varied from him being this cruel and kind of mean slave owner to also being a man who fell in love with a woman who was a slave and then freed his children. So we can kind of take a look and dive into what the different sources have to say. So during that era that Jefferson was from, slavery is very common, especially for white landowning males in the South. That being said, Jefferson had an all but common relationship with one of his slaves and slavery in general. According to Schwabach and Thomas Jefferson's Slavery and Slaves, almost all the slaves owned by Jefferson were inherited from the passing of his father and then also his father-in-law. In total, Jefferson owned as many as 135 slaves. Now, some historians see this as, and other facts, as a direct sign that Jefferson was blatantly racist and didn't care for slaves. Nick Mangus, being one of these, in his article Thomas Jefferson and Slavery, argues that not only was it from his actions, but also from words from the former president, which directly pointed to his racism. Magnus quotes Jefferson as saying that black Americans were inferior to whites in both mind and body. However, when looking through the notes of the Magnus article that he provided, he kind of recants a little bit by saying that that's not the actual quote, and that instead Jefferson offered a suspicion that this may or may not be true. And so this just goes to show how historians are able to kind of shape their own arguments based off of what they want the article to say. Although some see Jefferson's relations with slave Sally Hemings as a sign of their love, others argue that this is a sure sign of his racism. Smithers, in Those Who Labor for My Happiness, describes the slave and master relationship that Heming and Jefferson had as purely a sexual one, and one really that he kind of decided on and she didn't have much of a say in, rather than a love affair. On the other side of the coin, there are several historians who argue that although Jefferson owned slaves himself, he was overall a good guy and didn't necessarily love the institution of slavery as a whole. The Monticello website describes how Jefferson fathered the children of Sally Hemings only after his original wife had passed away, and that in his last will and testament, he actually sets them all free. The aforementioned Schwabach article also details a lesser-known story about how Jefferson actually came to the defense of slaves who were on public trial, and so in the court of law, he defends these guys, and so it's a widely different viewpoint than before. Now, in this case, more so than most in history, things are never really black and white, rather than just kind of a palette of colors that make up these different historians' opinions and point of view. But being said, it will furthermore be debated how Thomas Jefferson really truly felt about slavery and slaves. Hope you guys have a good week.